Good afternoon. We start with some international news now. American basketball player Brittney Griner faces her third substantial hearing after pleading guilty to charges of drug possession and drug smuggling last week. Stuart Smith, the SABC News correspondent, joins us live from Russia. A very good afternoon to you, Stuart. Just give us some context into what happened before this third appearance.
Yeah, of course. So Brittney Griner, a basketball player who's received 2 gold medals for her work at the Olympics, arrived in Moscow in February. She was then found by customs officials as having on her possession vape cartridges containing cannabis oil, 0.7 grams, but enough to see her charged and jailed for drug smuggling and drug possession. A few months later, she's now come to court. This is her third hearing, after which last week she pleaded guilty to the charges, and this week is expected to make statements in the court today, and also we're expected to hear from her defence about what they suggest should be mitigating circumstances for her sentence. She was due in Moscow to play for a basketball team in a city called Yekaterinburg, and of course because of that has no longer happened. She's remained in detention since, and the key here why it's making international news is that the US State Department believes there is a political element to this detention and trial, that she's at risk of not receiving a fair hearing because of the intense diplomatic problems between Russia and the United States at the moment, and so she's likely to get perhaps a longer trial than a longer sentence than she otherwise would.
Stuart, there was also concern when Brittney Griner was first arrested. I remember reading headlines like US basketball star disappears, and there was a concern that there wasn't enough action being taken, and that was attributed in part to her race and her gender as well. Just talk to us about when the case became more in international headlines and there was this kind of attention given to that case.
Yeah, that's right. There was a gap between when this happened, and it was only a couple of weeks later that the first reports came about her detention and as to why she had been detained. Now, in the first month, I would suggest there was a lot of secrecy and a huge lack of attention on her case. The US State Department justifies that, as with all examples when a foreigner is arrested abroad, they want to keep things on the down low while it's attempted to work out what exactly is going on, both what the charges are and whether there is a political element to this. In addition, Russia is certainly a country, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said it again today, that would rather keep these things discussed and debated through back-channel communications with other governments. It's not something they say is helped when there is public attention. But that changed when it became clear to the US State Department that things were not going to move along if there was not public pressure on Russia. And so that's why it seems that now, indeed, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, has spoken about it, the White House and the US State Department, and her case has been upgraded from simply a foreigner arrested abroad to one under the presidential department responsible for hostage affairs, which means it gets all the resources of, say, for example, the US Embassy, a representative of whom arrived again today to join the trial.
Stuart, what next?
For Brittney Griner, it will be this hearing, the third of what looked originally to be around 5, but having now pled guilty, the question will be what sentence she gets. And today is the opportunity for both the prosecution and defence to put to the judge how long she should serve time in prison or otherwise. The maximum sentence is 10 years. It seems a lot for 0.7 grams of cannabis, but the key here is that she was found taking these over an international border, and that classifies it as drug smuggling. The prosecution will, of course, want the minimum sentence possible, which is 5 years. That could further be reduced, perhaps with some sort of clemency in place by the judge, because Brittney Griner did plead guilty early on in the hearing. And also there's the potential, if she is convicted for a long amount of time, for a prisoner swap. Not something publicly discussed between Russia and the United States, but we understand quite clearly from comments by both sides that there are discussions going on in the background about potentially swapping her for a Russian prisoner, possibly, if that's something the US State Department considers valuable.
Stuart Smith giving us an update from Moscow and Russia there. Thanks so much for that update.